When I was a young kid, around 10 I want to say, one of my favorite animated cartoons of all time was the popular adult comedy called Family Guy. It was great for a young lad such as myself. I loved the wacky Griffin family and their many misadventures, laughing, crying alongside them, rooting for them to succeed in whatever challenge came their way. Although, if there's one thing we've learned so far from my ongoing character deep dives, it's that some of those characters whom I used to adore ever so much started to change, becoming unrecognizable from their original incarnations, turning what was once a likable character into, well, a loathsome one. Not Quagmire though. I always hated Quagmire. Yes, it's because he yelled at Brian. But really, I honestly think Quagmire has had the most drastic change out of any other Family Guy character, because it wasn't a case of the character slowly changing and becoming flanderized over time, instead, having to quickly shift his entire personality to keep up with the ever-changing social climate. His old personality just being chalked up to, he likes women and sex. I mean, how am I meant to relate to this guy? What was once Peter's sex-addicted neighbor who would do anything he could to get with a woman, became this weird, boring old man who for some reason plays the straight man to his friends' antics, compared to the first few seasons where he was arguably the most wild out of all of them. And I think there is still a way to make his character work, but the main issue we're gonna see is that Family Guy, at least nowadays, loves dealing in extremes, so if they couldn't push Quagmire in this certain way anymore, then they had to completely shift his entire personality. So today we're going to take a look at the degradation of Glenn Quagmire, and how he became a pervert without purpose. I think the title is funny, okay? But first, don't you want cool pieces of plastic molded into things you recognize? Well, I do. That's why I'm happy this video is sponsored by Temu. Temu is an online store that has some of the coolest stuff at some of the cheapest prices on the entire internet. My last video was about Bandy and Ink Machine, so if you wanted to, you could get these radical Bandy figures for less than $20, with free shipping. How about this deal that only viewers of this video can get? Garfield's plush was $10, now $134. Wow. How about an actual Nintendo Switch OLED, with a 30% coupon, dropping the price from $300 to only $239? There's no better deal than this. So click the link in the description below to get your picks and enjoy exclusive benefits, and be sure to use my code SUN4393 for an extra 30% off the entire order, plus free shipping. And thanks to Temu for sponsoring this video. I love that this series has gone from Brian Griffin to Joe Swanson, to Springtrap, and now Glenn Quagmire. Now, obviously, we're going to start this by analyzing Quagmire's character in the first few seasons of Family Guy, before going into how they got stuck with what to do with him. See, at first, Quagmire was actually one of the most popular and iconic characters of the entire series. Initially presented as nothing more than that down-for-anything ladies' man, who chills out in his bachelor pad. That old radio host voice and toothy smile told you everything you need to know about the guy. He was cool.
Package for Glenn Quagmire?
Excuse me.
This was highlighted a lot in episodes like Season 2's Forefather, where Chris is neglected by Peter and so he starts hanging out with Quagmire instead. Him being presented as this cool neighbor who could be neat to hang out with in moderation, but is way too irresponsible to have a family of his own. I always felt that contrasted well against Peter who, for all of his own faults, at the end of the day loved and cared for his kids. Makes Chris appreciate him more in the end too. He really was a fairly one-note character early on, but you didn't really care because he had a bunch of hilarious moments that highlighted how absurd of a person he was, saying the most crazy perverted stuff out there but with such confidence that you couldn't help but find it funny.
Gay marriage? Come on. Two halves can't make a whole without a hole. Giggity, 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 giggity. Ooh, ee, ooh, ah, ah, ting, tang, walla, walla, bing, bang. Ooh, ee, ooh, ah, ah, ting, tang, walla, walla, bing, bang.
One of the main ways they'd use this was with his crush on Lois, although less of a crush and more of an obsession. There was evidently no loyalty in his friendship with Peter for how much he fawned over her. There even being multiple episodes later on that showed them going out with each other during one of the many Peter and Lois marital crisis episodes, Quagmire swooping in to have his chance. Which, you know, he later criticizes Brian for, but we'll get to that. During this time, he was mainly just used for sex jokes, rarely having any major plot importance of his own that didn't amount to joining in on Peter's wacky misadventures. But one of the first episodes I remember to really take the time to sit and acknowledge the way he acts, as anything other than simply the status quo, was Season 4's Blind Ambition, where after he gets caught spying on Lois in the bathroom, he gets arrested, and the women of the neighborhood band together to threaten him with being kicked off Spooner Street, his friends having to now try and help him reform into not being such a pervert.
I don't want to bring a new baby into the world with him running around.
Okay, first of all, Bonnie, you've been pregnant for like 6 years, all right? Either have the baby or don't.
I think that was the first time I'd ever seen a cartoon be meta, and it blew my freaking mind. Because this is Family Guy, they get distracted for like 20 minutes with a chicken fight, and then he accidentally saves the life of some lady in a changing room, so they just forget about this and trail off into a story about Peter wanting to eat nickels so he can also feel accomplished, and then he goes blind. You know, in typical unfocused Family Guy fashion. And so this rare acknowledgement of his personality and actions being harmful is just sort of dropped. After this, things continued as normal for the most part with him. Any plotline they gave him never really revolved around taking a deep dive into addressing his personality, instead finding other traits to give him, like him being a pilot or him loving cats. There's even the one where he has to get left with the daughter he never knew he had, and then has to give her up by the end, which is a pretty sad one. You know, every now and then they would give us a pretty decent Quagmire episode, but then, at other points, they took it to an extreme. And that's not even a bad thing. I think Quagmire doing a lot of this heinous stuff could be fine, but it's all about the way the show executes it. Like when they have an episode where he shames his sister for staying with a man who abuses her, and straight up says to her face that he doesn't even see her as a woman because of this. But like, this is the same man who constantly sees women as nothing but objects? Comes off pretty tone-deaf from a writing standpoint. To me, the best Quagmire episodes were always the ones where he acted completely in character, but everyone else was able to see him for how awful of a person he's been. One of my absolute favourite moments in the whole show comes from season 10, where Meg turns 18, and doing what Quagmire does, he comes in to finally make his move. Peter being confused and furious as to why he's doing this, with Quagmire playing it off the way he always has. This is just who he is and what he does. Peter never had an issue with this before, so why should he now? Taking Meg out to a cabin to have sex with her, where Peter follows suit and gives Meg the most real verbal beatdown we've ever seen from a man who looks like this.
Holy... You may be an adult, but you're still my daughter. And it's my job to protect you from errant wieners. So I don't care how old you are, you're gonna do what I say and get in a damn car!
Again though, Family Guy. The only real consequence here is Lois telling Quagmire that he can't come over for a month. Perfect, you gonna grind him for a week too? But still, they're able to lean into that depravity the character is iconic for, while still not glorifying it, or at least showing a different side to it. The character's not always finding it funny. I think another episode which does this well is Season 12's Quagmire's Quagmire, which sees him getting with a woman who's basically the female equivalent to him, and as it turns out, he doesn't like being on the receiving end too much. All of this is to say that for years and years they find ways to make his personality work despite obviously not being the most politically correct out there, through playing on how the other characters react to him and sprinkling in other traits unrelated. But after a certain point you could tell that due to the ever-changing social climate, they realized they had to change him. I can imagine the staff were perhaps worried of something happening that was similar to the whole problem with the poo controversy, where one guy was able to make a big enough stink about the matter, to the point where the show itself is forced to unceremoniously remove the character altogether, while publicly shaming themselves for even doing it in the first place. Which is weird to me, considering the whole ending to their weird Trump episode that definitely isn't already horribly dated, which sees Donald Trump bring up the argument that the Family Guy writers themselves made up.
Many children have learned their favorite Jewish, black, and gay jokes by watching your show over the years.
We're a cartoon. You can turn us off. You're the president. We can't turn you off.
I forgot how bizarre this episode was. They literally just stopped to break the fourth wall, compare themselves to Donald Trump as if anyone else was, and then tries to defend itself on its made-up argument. But it's weird, Family Guy, you know, you're either a silly cartoon where nothing should be taken seriously, or you're a show that likes to take a hard look at society and do what's best for everyone. I mean, jokes about rape were never really paraded around as super PC or anything. They were always considered incredibly edgy. It's not like you didn't know that.
Now can I have my own show, Peter?
Quagmire, you're a rapist.
I mean, isn't this the same show that wanted to get back at The Simpsons for making a quick jab at them by including a prolonged, unrelated sequence of Quagmire raping Marge Simpson? Yeah, no, it is. But at least according to the writers, something about Quagmire needed to change. And that's when it was announced at Comic-Con in 2018 that they had started writing an episode all about Quagmire and the Me Too movement. Now, it's like 5 years later at this point, and we have yet to see this episode's release. Dude, I was researching this video and found an episode called The Quagmire Show. They give this whole ass description of the entire episode and was confused as fuck because I literally watched through the whole show a couple years back and had no recollection of it existing. Only to find out that it was some fan wiki where they bloody make up episodes that don't even exist like fanfiction. Like, that makes finding accurate information easy, thanks. But who knows? Maybe it's coming up in this season or something. But if it just got canned, then wouldn't that make you guys look stupid? Being so public about wanting to address your previous mistakes and then just hoping everyone forgets about it? Because that's really the main thing they've been doing. Hoping everyone forgets. But like, what do you do with Quagmire when you no longer keep his defining trait of being a pervert? Well, he likes cats, didn't he? I guess just just do stuff with cats. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so I think I actually find the episode this Comic-Con panel was referring to. Just so happens that what they were referring to was pretty much a throwaway line. In a Season 18 episode, which just so happens to be the very next season after this panel happened, where Quagmire opens a cat cafe and Brian wants to put a stop to it because whatever the fuck, who cares? Where he tells Brian why he cares so much about the cafe in the first place.
Why did you open that place anyway?
Well, I've always been about sex and seducing women, but I just thought if I created something that makes people happy, maybe people would remember me for that.
So, their way of addressing nearly 2 decades of sexual assault jokes was for him to open a cat cafe. Cool. And nowadays, that's all Quagmire really is. When they have an episode about him, it either has to do with being a pilot, or loving cats, or hating Brian. But ironically, I think the worst part about his iconic speech to Brian can be attributed right back to him at this point, because Quagmire today is such a bore. If he's ever in an episode where he's not the focus, they just delegate him to continuously having those quirky, random, awkward type jokes, where he gets annoyed at something someone is saying and focuses on it for like a minute to deconstruct why someone said something strange. Like, I know he's meant to be 60 years old, but did you really need to write him to be such a buzzkill, you know? What was once this cool uncle-type ladies' man has quickly shifted into being nothing more than a sad old man who seems fed up all the time. His design doesn't even make sense anymore. These clothes, this face, they don't fit who Quagmire is as a character. Something like this would probably fit better. I don't know, man. You can see it as the character gradually having changed, like with the last season episode where Lois starts getting mad that he specifically won't hit on her anymore because she's his best friend's wife, even though that never stopped him before. But to me personally, his whole character now just comes off like the writers were content taking him to these extremes, realized they might get in trouble if they were to be called out about it, and tried to denounce his whole character before that happened to make themselves seem proactive about this kind of stuff. But like, it probably was for the better. Like I said, Quagmire was never one of my favorites or anything, he was pretty one note, but getting rid of one basic character trait for an equal amount of boring ones doesn't really make an entertaining character in my books. So see you later, Glenn Quagmire. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. That's what you get for shitting on Brian, what else can I say?